San Diego, North County specifically.
North County. I'm gonna
Uh,
give away all my secrets.
right.
So
Conway,
people
be
are,
happy to know that our buddy Nick is signed in.
Oh yeah. Give away all my
Yeah.
secrets.
Right.
so people
Conway, be
are,
happy to know that our buddy Nick is signed
oh,
in.
Oh yeah. Give away all my
so hold
secrets.
on.
We're getting reverb.
Yeah. Not anymore.
That was my technical, we were going live streaming there and getting
Okay.
the reverb. So we got that
We
going.
got Mill Valley, Bay
Oh, all
Area,
right, NorCal.
Ken,
Oh,
Kenfield.
April, my friend April, and possibly her son are on up here in Kentfield.
Oh, love it.
Hello, April.
Slow, Kevin and Slow. Nice. Diamond Bar, Carlsbad.
All right. Well, why don't we, yeah, let's get this show on the road. Before I turn it over to Conway and George, well, first of all, actually, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Tracy Diaz. I'm the publisher of California Fly Fisher. Took the magazine over about a couple years ago, and I hope most of you know, we redesigned it and relaunched it in print as well as digital. And yeah, encourage you, if you came into this webinar by some other way, I definitely encourage you to check out the magazine and subscribe at calflyfisher.com. We'd love to have you in the community. And, you know, speaking of the community, we have coming up actually some events all across the state. We're hosting the International Fly Fishing Film Festivals in 5 different locations, Bay Area as well as down in Southern California. So all you San Diego folks that chimed in, we have a screening on April 7th at the Southwestern Yacht Club. That's in partnership with the San Diego Fly Fishers. And then there are several up here in the Bay Area with Lost Coast Outfitters and Sacramento with fly fishing specialties. So yeah, we hope to see you at one of those shows. You can get tickets at flyfilmfest.com. And then if you're in the Santa Barbara area, I don't know if I saw anyone in the Santa Barbara area, but there's a neat event going on that Santa Barbara Fly Fishers are hosting, and it's the screening of A River Runs Through It, but they've got a panel discussion beforehand with Tom Skerritt, who starred in the film, as well as Chris Wood, the executive director of TU, John McClain, Norm McClain, the author's son. And they'll be talking about how that one film had just had such a huge impact on the fly fishing industry, and getting people out on rivers and caring about conserving our rivers and our fish. So that'll be a really interesting panel discussion that we'll be covering later in the magazine as well. So with that, I'm going to go dark here and turn it over to George and Conway.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you for all that you're doing for California fly fishing and with California Fly Fisher. It's incredible to have see you resurrect the magazine and bigger and better than it has been. And so it's great. These webinars are kind of the next step in helping develop community. And it's great to have Conway on here. And Conway, you're not quite an old head. You're not quite in the old guy category. But when I was a kid, I remember meeting you, and you're like this total rock star out fishing for Makos. And what I was most impressed with, what I admire most about you is just like how kind and awesome you are. It was intimidating to come up and say hello, and you were like the nicest guy on the planet, and you always continue to be. And so I've always admired that about you. And reading your articles in California Fly Fisher magazine about San Diego really intrigued me. So I'm excited to dig in.
Well, thank you, George, and Tracy for having me. This is a really great honor. You know, the long legacy of California Fly Fisher. I mean, I read that so many years. I mean, for many, many years, and I'm so glad to see it back. I feel like I'm getting to be one of the old guys. You know,
but you're getting there.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I'm glad to know that I was that I was gracious. You know, you felt that. And I feel that it's important to to be humble and to pass on it, just to share your information and just, we're fishing, right? It's all about
Totally.
Good energy and getting people involved and having just a good feeling around that. So yeah, so this is great, and thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, let's dig into San Diego. I think that on the face of it, most people don't think of fly fishing in San Diego as a destination, but you grew up running all over San Diego, and tell us a little bit about how you came to fly fish in San Diego.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So my father, and we'll get to a slide of him later on, but he really inspired me to fly fish. He was a big early saltwater fly fisherman, warm water fly fisherman. He also conventional fished. But we spent our summers in Stanley, Idaho, from the time I was 6 until I was 15. That's where I really developed the passion for fly fishing. So in the winter, we would come back to San Diego. My dad was a school teacher, and every weekend we were out fishing our local reservoirs, which we have many great reservoirs here. We were fishing the San Diego River, which when I was a kid, it wasn't developed. It kind of careened down into Mission Bay, and the area called Mission Valley was a totally wild place with this river, and it had deep clear pools with largemouth bass and crappie and green sunfish. So we would go spend a lot of time there. But I was lucky. My father took me fishing every weekend, and took a fly rod with him, and then eventually I started fly fishing a lot more. But you're right, San Diego isn't really considered, I don't think, sort of an epicenter for fly fishing. But there's a great culture down here that was started many, many years ago with the San Diego fly fishers, and even far beyond that. Not only saltwater, but also not only freshwater, but also saltwater. So we had two silos of fly fishing that were kind of developing as I was growing up, and even before that. And I was kind of brought up in that long history.
Yeah, and I mean, some of these photos, and we can jump through. I mean, look at that. That's an insane pass.
How's that? That's Lake Hodges, actually. I managed this reservoir. I used to work for the city of San Diego for many, many years. I was a wetlands manager. And Hodges Reservoir was one of my reservoirs I managed. And the thing about Lake Hodges, it yielded some of the largest bass in the United States. And this is one of them. It was caught in 2004. You can see the date down there. But Lake Hodges is a very unique reservoir that produces a lot of big fish like this, and you can get these on the fly. But this, San Diego is known for its great largemouth bass fishing, and it's always been a great place to fly fish for bass as well. Not really known, but it really is a great place to do that.
And do you experience like some of the cyclical aspects of bass fishing in those lakes where it's kind of, it builds up and then bait supply depletes, or what's that like? What is that sort of multi-year cycle like on those lakes?
Yeah, and that's a
reservoirs?
great question. And it is very cyclical. So it really depends on water quality, how much water we get, whether we're in a drought scenario, a drought sort of time period, or, an El Nino period. And that definitely influences, obviously, the lake elevation level, but it also influences and affects the food items. So the shad populations, if you have not great water quality, shad populations are less. Also, what creates creates really largemouth bass are the stocking of rainbow trout. So a lot of our reservoirs are stocked with very small state rainbow trout, and the largemouth bass, the Florida strain bass, predate on those, so they get really big. Now, so those reservoirs that stock rainbow trout are very deep and very clear. They're more difficult to fish with a fly, just because of the setup, the way they're sort of configured, deep, clear water, and those bass are eating a large food item once a week or once every 2 weeks, so they're not as inspired to eat. Now, Lake Hodges, on the other hand, and for instance, I'll just use Hodges as an example. They don't stock largemouth. They don't stock trout there, so they're very keyed in on shad. They're keyed in on crayfish. They're keyed in on sunfish. So that really makes it the more conducive to to hit a fly. And you can look in this photo how the water quality, it's a little bit stained. And that is really great for fly fishing. The very clear water reservoirs are more difficult. Not that you can't catch a lot of bass in them, but these reservoirs that have more of a stained watercolor that don't stock trout are typically better.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that fish is extremely large, and looks to be like maybe a female, and it's in January. Do you guys get earlier spawners because of water temps down there?
We
Is
do.
that sort of, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Lake Hodges, for instance, they have two spawns in Hodges. They have a spring and a fall spawn, and it's because the water quality there and the water temperature is just at certain levels that it can support two different spawns. And it's interesting, when I manage that reservoir, every spring, so the fish would spawn very early there for whatever reason, and I think it's because it's a coastal reservoir, so it's very close to the coast, and it warms up a lot more. And it doesn't get as cool in the wintertime. But over the years, I would observe in the sort of late spring, very small bass fry swimming around. I'm like, okay, well, that's obviously the sort of the spawning recruitment from that spring. But in the fall, I started noticing very small bass kind of swimming around like in October. Like, what is going on there? So I talked to a biologist, and he said on certain years, and it may be influenced by, well, it is influenced by water quality, but also maybe an El Nino event, the bass will, I guess, kind of clutch, and they will spawn again in October or the fall. And so, and I'll expand on that a little bit more. So let's say, for instance, the reservoirs, their elevation level drops during the spawn, which they do. The water departments bring the water down. I think you'll have a grouping of those fish that actually get to spawn before the water drops, and then you have another group of fish that are ready to spawn, but as that water elevation gets lower, they move off the bank and they don't spawn, and then they might do that later on in the year, later on in the summer, maybe in the fall. That's just my theory. But working on these reservoirs and observing that over the years, is really interesting to kind of think that through, and I think that's what happens.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, if you read any, sort of article on bass fishing or anything, it's going to talk about, spawning time being much later than that. But that's, considering, water temps in most places you're fishing for bass, right? I mean, or especially up here, we think like maybe end of March, April, May, when the water temps warm up enough for the bass to spawn. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think our climate down here is it's very temperate. It doesn't really fluctuate, and I believe these fish just kind of adjust to that. And then if you have a drastic sort of temperature change, that'll influence what they do. So this bass was caught waiting, and you can see I'm only in maybe shin deep water. So in the springtime, before the females really shoot their eggs, they'll get up on those beds, and you can sight fish to them. And so that fish was caught sight fishing too. And then, so I'm going to go to this next slide. This is Lake Barrett. So this is a very unique reservoir in San Diego County. It's catch and release only. It's limited entry as well. You have to basically go online and apply to get on it. But these are northern strain bass, where this bass is a Florida strain. These are northern strains. So I think this is one of the only reservoirs in the West that still has a pure northern strain bass. So these bass are much more aggressive than the Florida strain. These are more surface feeding fish, and their disposition is way more aggressive. They pack feed, almost like, I don't know, a striper. You see stripers up on the surface chasing shad. So these fish, that's how they act. And I'm telling you, if you can ever get on Lake Barrett with a fly rod, it is honestly, I think, the greatest bass fishing reservoir in the West, especially with the fly rod, because you will be successful at catching these fish. And it is just a wonderful, wonderful place. And it's, like I said, limited entry, catch and release only, so it's not worked over. You can't launch your own boat. You have to either rent a boat there, or you can bring in a kayak or a float tube.
Fascinating.
And so these fish are pretty much unmolested. And it is really, really a unique experience for the fly angler.
And who's managing that? Who manages the access?
So the city of San Diego. manages that. So most all the reservoirs I'm going to talk about are all managed by the city of San Diego.
And are they managed for fishing and recreational purposes as well as water reservoirs?
They're primary water reservoirs. That's the
Uh-huh.
first sort of that's the first mission that the city does, but they do open them up for recreation, which is really great. Over the years, they focus more on water supply than recreation. When I first started working for the city, these reservoirs were they were known all over the United States, if not all over the world, as really great resources for fishing. Not only bass, but well, especially bass, because the Southern California, San Diego lakes in specific were known as the bass reservoirs in the U.S. But also they had great trout stocking programs. They had great crappie fishing, and they were managed very, very well. And so over the years, the management of these reservoirs has kind of changed. You can still access them, but the services aren't what they used to be. I mean, they had a flourishing, boat rental operation that they would contract out with concessionaires. You could launch your own private boat. I mean, it was just really, really dynamite. But what happened over the last several years, I would say over the last 15 years, the water level in a lot of these reservoirs has lowered. So it has made it more difficult for people to launch their boats, made it more difficult for concessionaires to come in and open up a full operation like they used to. The other limiting factor is these reservoirs are only open certain days a week. So, for instance, Lake Hodges, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, that's it. It's not open 7 days a week. So none of these reservoirs are except Lake Murray and Lake Miramar. Those are primary reservoirs that are in the city of San Diego. But those are the only two city reservoirs. There are other county reservoirs that are open 7 days a week, but just for the city, yeah. Most of them are limited on the days you can enter to fishing. But that actually makes it kind of good because the fish aren't totally harassed, right? These aren't really big reservoirs. So if you have boats over the top of them all the time and guys throwing jigs, the fish do get a little bit kind of weary. So having that limited access and not full access, every day of the week, I think it's actually better for the fishery.
No, absolutely. That's super cool that they do that. And I would assume the boat regulation is surrounding invasive species and not wanting invasives to get into the reservoirs.
Yeah. Oh, you like quagga mussel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the city has a pretty stringent, we have to do quagga mussel inspections, but I think, the lack of boat launching now is more a symptom of just water level.
Okay.
So years ago, the water level was much higher. The elevations could be kept higher, and they were just really great recreational, facilities, which they still are, but it's definitely not up to where it was maybe 20 years ago. But let me tell you, the fish are still there. You can see that fish there. I believe that was Lake El Capitan, which is another city reservoir. Walking the bank, it was probably early summer. I'm in shorts, but once again, I mean, you can walk the bank and have some really great success.
What would you say? I mean, California is a big state, so I know what we're experiencing up here. Down south, what would you say, like water on the 10, 20-year spectrum in terms of drought? I mean, we always say, oh, we had a wet year, we're out of the drought, but these things happen over 10 or 20 years. What would you say, where would you place San Diego water wise right now?
We're definitely low.
Yeah.
We've had a 10-year drought, even though we've had big water years recently.
Yeah.
It hasn't been sustained over a longer period of time. And so just my experience on these lakes is that they are getting lower. So we can talk climate change and all that, but it definitely is happening. And where you notice it is when you're fishing in our local mountains. And when I was younger, and even up to 20 years ago, we had streams in the Laguna Mountains that held trout year round. Pine Creek, Cottonwood Creek. But now those creeks are pretty much dry. And so that's sort of an indicator of what's going on here. So the the sort of the water table, the springs, all that feeds all that is definitely drying up. So that's one thing that I always look at, and it is a concern. I mean, our reservoirs, if they're hooked up to the California aqueduct system, will always have water. A reservoir like Barrett, a reservoir like Lake Hodges, a reservoir like, well, let's just take those two for example. If we don't have rain, they will dry up.
Yeah.
You know, they will dry up. In fact, Lake Hodges probably back in the, it was probably maybe the early 60s went almost completely dry because we didn't have any rain. So that potentially could happen. But our primary water reservoirs, our major storage reservoirs that are hooked up to the California aqueduct system, they won't go dry. So, yeah.
What do we got there?
So that's a bluegill. So this is another fish I love to fish. And honestly, in May, you can go to any of these reservoirs. You can go to the San Diego River. You can find a local. If you can get onto a golf course, you can do that. But springtime fishing for bluegill in San Diego is really, really fun. It's great, and all of the reservoirs have them. And typically in May, these little guys get up into very shallow water and they kick up their beds, and that's when they're most aggressive. And when you go out and you throw a popper at them on like a three-way, it is really fun. In fact, I really look forward to doing this right before like my Mako season because I just love these things fight so hard. And if you get a really, really large one, they will fight like hell. I mean, they're great. So, but it's also the visual component of those things coming up and grabbing a popper. And you know, when we're talking about urban fly fishing, you get off work, right? You've had a long day. You want to go out to a local reservoir. You can go to a place like Lake Murray that has great bluegill fishing. You can park in the parking lot, walk down, walk the bank, and have some great fishing for bluegill. So for me, it's a great way to spend the evening. You know, that's typically when I fish these things. So, but they're such a great fish. I just love them. And
yeah, they're incredible. I mean, I think like as like growing up as a kid, bluegill was my gateway drug to fly fishing, right? They're just incredible fish.
And it brings back great memories. When I was a kid fishing with my dad, the first time throwing a fly rod, a little fiberglass fly rod that he put in my hand, and he'd say, just throw out by those tulies and just pop your popper. He would say this, pop your popper and let it sit and let the rings disappear around it. Don't move it until then. And by the time the rings disappeared, a bluegill came up and grabbed it. So, and it was Lake Murray that I used to fish with my dad all the time because we lived very close to that. So, they're such a great fish to kind of start off the fishing season. They're just dynamite. They're just
what's your favorite bluegill popper and what's your favorite bass popper for Lake Barrett?
Well, let me. So I don't know if I think I've got. I don't know if I. So okay, this guy right here,
the swimming frog.
The swimming frog in various sizes. Anything hits it, right?
Yeah.
And this fly I use all the time because remember these fish are they're reactionary, right? And bluegill and bass, they hit all sorts of little frogs and tadpoles, and you can fish this right on the surface. I've actually put a little bit of split shot in front of it to where it just kind of kicks right underneath the surface. So there's just various ways you can fish this. But to be, any sort of popper, you can go into your shop or any shop and get a little foam popper. They work. Bait fish imitations, crawdad imitations, frog imitations, any of that stuff works great. Like I said, these fish aren't super selective on what you're throwing at them, but they do get a little persnickety, I think, on size. And so what I do is I always start with a smaller fly. I don't know why. And I can always work up, right? And
you can always add salt.
I can always add, exactly. And so, I don't, in a lot of the poppers I use today are the ones that have been in my fly box for the last 20 years. You don't break off a lot of bluegill, right? But, and that's the great thing about it. It's very simple. You can use kind of anything that you've had for a number of years. You don't have to go out and, buy a bunch of the modern foam poppers because, bluegill are just really aggressive. Bass are pretty aggressive. They can be a little persnickety, but that's basically it. My leader system is really very short, You know, I'll use a 7-foot leader, nothing long. Um, but yeah, so this is a picture of just what I use for bass. So this is kind of a tackle overview for bass. So that's that same bass that I got at Lake Hodges that was in the first picture.
What a fat beauty.
I think that fish was close to, it was over 10 pounds. But yeah, so that is a holy grail fish, right? That's a unicorn. And to have that fish in the right spot at the right time, I mean, it was really cool. You know, the unique thing about fishing for bass like this is there's a lot of hunting that goes on. You have to cover a lot of shoreline, and you have to find the right spots where these fish come up. Now, largemouth bass traditionally come up in the same spots every year and sort of what I've observed every year to the same kind of general area. So if you know that, you can go out and you can go ahead and kind of ply those waters and look for those fish. But this fish probably, if I hadn't timed this right, it probably wouldn't have been there the day before or the day after. So the females come up, they do their thing, and then they're gone. You know, you can get males, a lot of the smaller males, but to get these bigger females, you really kind of have to be there. And another thing about these, you know, there's a correlation between photo period, there's a correlation between moon phase and how that lines up in the springtime. That really sort of triggers these fish to spawn. And the reason I know that is because I observed these fish for so many years. I mean, they were right outside my office. I could go out and say, oh, wow, it's a full moon and the photo period is doing this. And oh, wow, we've got three large bass, big females moving up under the dock. So that told me, well, if they're there, they're probably out in these general spawning areas. So
all right, you're starting to sound a lot like a yoga teacher here. What are your moon phase theories?
okay, so moon phase. So that has a lot for bass. So anything up to the full moon, 5 days prior is, in my opinion, a trigger for these fish. They come up. Anything on the full moon or behind it, it's not great fishing. Now, new moons are good, but I find new moons aren't as good for the springtime bass. But that's me, you know. And it's kind of correlates with saltwater fishing as well. It's the same thing. 5 days up to a full moon is good or great. Anything behind that, typically the fishing activity kind of declines. Their interest kind of declines. I don't know what that is. Maybe they feed. You know, the old theory is, you know, the fish feed at night on a full moon. I got to tell you, I've fished on a lot of full moons and I haven't caught any fish. So, you know, I think they feed up until that moon gets high and then they shut down. And then a new moon, I think any time before or after a new moon is very, very good. Photo period's another thing. So when we're talking about bass, the photo period, so the longer duration that sun stays on the water, that kind of it signals to these fish to come up and spawn. And I think that kind of trumps a lot of different things. Like the water temperature is cooler, the photo period is longer. Initially, that photo period is going to tell them, I got to go spawn. Then they get up on the beds. Now, if you have something like a drastic water pull out of a reservoir, it drops like 5 feet. These reservoirs overnight could drop 5 feet. The fish will feel that, then they'll move off the bank. And they'll either clutch, they'll wait for the right opportunity, or maybe they just wait. I don't know. But so that's just kind of my theory. It's a theory, but I think it's worked. It's worked. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, as if anybody who's figured out a fishery, I mean, everything starts with theories, and then you start getting a lot of reinforcing information that, or information that totally denies that, and you rework your theory. So it's all theories that we test over and over again.
Right, and I think and also, you know, fishing is so much observation. It's not going out and casting, right, and catching. Totally. It's watching and feeling and knowing. Okay, well, this looks good. It feels good. Why does it look good? Why does it feel good? Well, the wind's blowing the right way. The moon phase is doing this. You know, for instance, I'm seeing certain birds that always kind of connect the dots to good fishing. All that kind of stuff. And it doesn't really matter if you're freshwater fishing or saltwater. It's all the same, right? I really think so.
Yeah.
But observation, I think, is the greatest thing in fishing.
Yeah, I loved when you mentioned you saw the little baby bass in October, right? And you're like, what are you doing here? You know, like that's such a great
I remember that
observation and
day.
question. Yeah.
So I stepped outside my office and I'm like, what are those? And I looked
Yeah.
down and there were small little bass. I'm like, it's October.
Yeah.
And so those things respond probably early August,
Hmm.
something like that. So that was a late season spawn, right? So I call that a fall spawn. They probably actually spawned in September or, August or September,
Hmm.
but I saw them. They were like this big in October.
Yeah.
And those fish in these reservoirs grow very quickly. If there's enough biomass for them, they'll eat all kinds of stuff and they'll get really big really quickly. So, but that once again, that's just observation, and that's fishing, right? You know,
Mhm.
as I think we all do this. We go to a river, we just don't start casting. We sit and watch, right? We see what the hatches are doing, we see what the water's doing, and I think that really puts us in the right headspace to be successful.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, we got some other species to talk about,
Oh
huh?
yeah, here we go. Okay, so the carp. Okay, I am a carp freak. And I had a dear friend named John Hendrickson who got me into this. He used to manage the San Diego Fly Shop many years ago. And he called me one day and he goes, hey, man, we got to go up to Lake Henshaw and go carp fishing. I'm like, okay. I used to catch them on dough balls. I like the fight. So I used to fish Henshaw as a kid with my dad, right? We used to catch bass and crappie and bullhead. So we go up there, and Lake Henshaw is a very flat, shallow reservoir with great sand flats. And so John and I went up there the first day, and we took a little boat across the lake and we parked it and we walked. You can kind of see in this photo. And we were seeing tailing carp. And he got me into that. And oh my gosh, it was as good as it was. I'm like, this is like permit fishing. And I had done a fair amount of redfish and permit and bonefish at that point. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an hour and 15 minutes from my house and I'm actually sight casting to something. But that's the great thing about carp is that you can truly sight fish to them and they feed like a saltwater fish, right? They feed like a redfish. They tail like a permit. And they are difficult to catch. They're probably one of the most difficult fish to catch. But the great thing is you have so many shots at them that you're going to be successful, but you do have to be on your game in terms of your casting, your placement of the fly, how you approach carp is really, really important because they're in very shallow water much of the time. So it really, carp fishing with the fly really it really tunes up your whole sort of sight fishing, your ability to cast to something, quietly, to approach it quietly. And then they fight really, really well too. So it's also going to test your fish fighting ability. But they are really a great, great fish. So this is John and me walking a flat at Lake Hodges, or no, Henshaw. So this is kind of a blurry photo, but this is typically the south end of Lake Henshaw. Mm. So I would consider this urban fishing. We're not in the city. We're about an hour and 15 minutes out, but still, this is kind of urban fishing, right? This is within a drive. You can get there within an hour or so. But this flat, you can see all the way across the lake. It's probably a quarter mile. It's that shallow the whole way. Mm. And on this particular day, the water was kind of it was stained, but it's so shallow you could see the fish. You can see the shapes right in front of you, and you can see the tails right in front of you. And I don't know, there you can kind of see there's kind of an area out there, and I'm looking at where those fish are, and they're right there, and they're tailing like this. But I remember that I think this may have been, I don't know, it was probably the third or fourth time I went there with John, and it really got me inspired. And I spent so much time here for many, many years chasing these carp, and I still do, but I'm really busy now with other things. But every opportunity I get, I go up here. This is another thing I do in the spring. In addition to the bluegill, I go carp fishing because it's exciting. You're sight fishing to them. You're watching a tail in front of you, or you'll see them on the surface kind of clooping, kind of feeding on, sort of little insects and stuff like that. They're feeding in scum lines. And you can throw a dry fly at those fish. And they
call just real quick, what do you call spring? Because California is incredibly diverse, and you have traditional, the first day of spring, the end of winter. What do you call spring?
The first day of April is my spring.
Okay.
I think that's kind of when I start going out and exploring around. March, a lot of times we have, winter storms that come through, or early spring storms. So the water levels are kind of all over the place. There's a lot of runoff going in, but by April, things kind of calm down, and that's when I really started going out and doing that. So spring, or so April, May, and then early June. But April, May, that's the window for me, for bass, for bluegill, and for carp. There's enough. So that's like your typical henshaw carp. Now you can fish carp. So the reservoirs that I really love to fish carp, number one, Lake Henshaw, because the setup is great. I mean, big flats, surface feeding carp, tailing carp, floating carp, cruising carp, all those scenarios. Okay. Lake Hodges is very good. The eastern shoreline of Lake Hodges is very similar to Henshaw. It's shallow, very hard sand, and the water can get fairly clear there. It's not as big as Henshaw, but it's a great place to wade and sight fish to carp. And then Lake Marina is another very, very good reservoir. But that's pretty far away. That's probably 2 hours from San Diego. So that's kind of outreaching. But if I were to come down to San Diego, I would fish Henshaw and I would fish Lake Hodges. Those are the two carp lakes. And probably the closest one for people coming from, well, if you're coming from LA, they're both about equal distance. If you're coming from northern San Diego County, obviously Hodges is open. But Henshaw is open 7 days a week because it's run by a different water district. So it's open 7 days a week. And if you're coming from from LA, they have really kind of these cool little cabins there you can camp in too.
Cool.
They're pretty inexpensive. They've got a great restaurant there. When you go to Henshaw, it's like stepping back in time. Like you're stepping back in 1960. And so that's another thing. I really remember that going there as a kid. And it's interesting. Lake Henshaw at one time was considered, it was a premier bass lake in America. And once again, what happened, the reservoir had to lower its water because the dam was on an earthquake fault. So they lowered it so low that the bass fishing it didn't disappear, but the carp kind of took over. And so I remember as a kid going there back in the late 60s, and they had a rental fleet of probably 100 boats. You had cars lined up down, highway, whatever that highway is. It was insane. It was crazy. You had all sorts of, I remember, pro athletes fishing there. I remember, celebrities would come down and fish. It was really a happening place. But you go there now and it's kind of, you look at it, it's kind of like, it's like a ghost town. It's kind of like the Salton Sea. Not as crusty, but there's still an essence of coolness to it. And the bass fishing is still really good. But honestly, I think the star of the show at Henshaw are the carp for the fly anglers.
Awesome. Do you guys get carp in the rivers, like the San Diego River? There are carp roaming around in there too?
We do. However, they're very difficult to catch because the San Diego River is really tule line, most of it. So you don't have a lot of area that you can wade. Now, also, and I haven't fished those river carp very much, but they're a little more touchy for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. You will see klooping carp in the San Diego River. So they're up feeding like this. So they're sucking off the surface. And that's the best opportunity for the fly angler. And, the approach, guys have different approaches for those. Typically what I'll use is a little bit longer leader, maybe a 9-10 foot leader, and like a small parachute Adams, like a size 16, get it super dry and just throw it right in front of those fish. And as they move towards it, they'll just kind of suck it in. Don't put it on top of them because you'll spook them, but let them work towards it. Because you'll see klooping carp will just kind of work in a pattern like this. They'll work down like a scum line or a weed line, or just in general out in the middle of the lake. And if you place that fly on the perimeter of them, eventually, if you're patient enough, they'll kind of work to it, and they'll just see it. And just, I don't know if they see it or they just suck everything down that's in front of them. And that's how you get it. I want to go back and talk about Henshaw. So there's something that unique happens there too. Every spring, right around, well, it's usually in the middle of May, they have a hopper hatch. and they have these little green hoppers that come off. And those carp will go after those hoppers very
Huh.
aggressively. It's pretty cool. You'll see the carp up on the surface, and they don't feed like this. They feed like right below the surface, like a submarine, and they create like a V wake. And what they're doing is they're searching for those hoppers on the surface. And so you take, and honestly, any hopper works. You know, they're just so focused in. I think it's more size that they want. So a smaller, you know, I don't know, maybe a size, I don't know, 12 hoppers, something like that. Whatever, matching the hopper size to the hoppers that are coming off. Those fish will actively chase down a hopper, a fly. So you'll make the cast, and the carp will hear it plop on the water, and they'll come over to investigate and grab it. And when that's happening and they're keyed into that, it's pretty cool. I mean,
Awesome.
it is unbelievable. And there's several people that have been doing it over the years. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you it's about as cool as it gets. I mean, it is really cool. When that hatch comes off, you got to kind of time it too, because sometimes it'll come off briefly and then it's gone. So like this year, they'll probably have a good hopper hatch because we've had a lot of rain. And so it's going to make the grass in the south end kind of sprout up. And I think that makes a perfect sort of, you know, hopper breeding habitat. And I always find that on more rainy years, we get better hopper hatches. And what happens, the hoppers will lay their eggs and they'll hatch. And then every day there's sort of this wind that blows at Lake Henshaw, and it blows the hoppers into the water. And those carp get keyed into it. And then it's just like, it's a matter of time. You just stand there and wait for it. And all of a sudden you'll see the carp V waking around, and then it's on. And these bites can last, a couple of hours. I mean, it's just like it's like shooting ducks in a barrel. It's like, you know, make a cast, catch one, make another cast. They're so keyed into it. It's really, really cool.
I love it. I love it. Well, just quickly, let's chat about what type of gear you like for chasing these carp, because it sounds like it could be pretty windy, and you need to maybe have I mean, a lot of those photos look pretty glassy, but
yeah,
I think you got some wind to kick the hoppers in.
Exactly. So this is like I'll stick briefly on this photo. This is a great example of a rutting or sort of kind of I just call it a mudding carp. You see the back out of the water? So that's what you're seeing. And it's hard sand, and so you're sight fishing to that. So that's the visual connection you have to cast to that. And this is what awesome. Henshaw and Hodges is all about. It's really great. It's excellent. And
so you're standing pretty far back there. Are you going to make your cast like over dry land to that fish?
Yes, I'm not even going to wade in the water, because you really, a lot of times you don't wade in the water, especially early in the morning when they're up on the bank, because you know what happens is, during the day, typically we have a westerly wind that pushes everything eastbound, right? So it's gone, and all the food items stacks up on those eastern banks, right? And so that next morning, all the food items there. So what do the carps do? They go to the chum line. They just basically cruise along that eastern shoreline, and they just pick off, you know, whatever it is, whether it's, you know, something on the surface, or, you know, these fish eat a lot of crayfish. And so I think the crayfish dial into that too. When the food items on the east bank, they're in there kind of grubbing around, grabbing stuff. So always, that's what I always look at. Westerly wind moves everything to the east, and that's where I'm going to start fishing in the morning, right? Now, when the wind kicks up later in the day, then you'll make your adjustment. But this is an early morning shot. But yes, the cast here would be, don't even wade in the water. In fact, you got to be super careful and very quiet when you see these fish do that, because they will pick up vibration and they'll slowly just move off the bank like this. Like they won't spook. They will feel the vibration, and they'll just kind of slide off the bank, and you won't
sulk away.
Yeah. Like I said, carp are a very difficult fish at times, but they're a great challenge. So let's talk about tackle. So, you know, 4 to 7 weight. I love 7 weights because we do get large carp here. Floating lines only. It's all I use. Long leaders. I do like a longer leader, 10 to 12 feet, especially when I'm fishing those fish right on the bank. Carp can be leader shy. You know, light tippet, that's kind of relative. I don't know. You know, I use like probably 12-pound test, you know. So what is that, 3X, something like that.
Light compared to Makos.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Strong drag. I mean, I've had a few carp get me close to my backing. They've never got me into my backing. But to have a good solid, any reel you're going to use on larger trout is going to be great, right? And then flies, basic trout patterns, nymphs and attractor patterns. Um, you know, I tie all kinds of kind of funky, weird stuff for carp. I look at what they eat, their food items. So crayfish, not big giant ones either. Carp don't like a big crawdad going like that in front of their face. They don't like it, but they go for the little soft. I call them greenback crawdads. They're very small, and in the springtime, those things are basically the baby crawdads that are being hatched, right? So they like eating those. They don't like the big red ones with the claws. It freaks them out. They don't like those. So in any kind of like a Clouser swimming nymph is an excellent carp fly. They're dynamite. I tie very small toads, very small. And the great thing about that fly is it hits the water lightly, but it sinks very slowly. And sometimes those carp will be up in the water column like this, and you'll see them. They're not on the bottom, but they're kind of just cruising. You can float that, sink that fly right in front of them, and slowly strip it away, and they'll grab it. And I honestly don't know if they think it's a crawdad, if they think it's a bait fish, if maybe it's a chironomid. I don't know. But I think they react just because it's a food item and they're omnivores, and if they're in the mood, they're going to capitalize on anything that they want to eat. Now, they can be really picky too. I mean, they can be very, very picky. So you have to kind of figure that out. But typically smaller flies are what I use. And honestly, anything in your trout nymph box will probably work great, right? I don't like using heavy lead eyes or weighted eyes on these things. I would rather have a softer approach. When I'm fishing them on the surface, a lot of times it's a size 16 parachute Adams, or a hopper, The problem there is sometimes you'll hook a really big carp and that the hook will, it'll straighten out or whatever. But
just like a light gauge dry fly hook doesn't
exactly.
cut it.
Yeah. So because if the fly is too big, you're not going to get them. They're so dialed into sort of the smaller food item.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the angler has to kind of figure that out. And I really think that carp really adjust to their environment. So for instance, the carp in Lake Henshaw are different than the carp in Lake Hodges. Carp in Lake Hodges primarily feed on crayfish, and they also feed on shad. I've seen them feed on the surface, which is totally bizarre. And I don't know how many bass fishermen have come in and said, I got 4 or 5 carp today on my crankbait.
Huh.
What does that mean? That means they're feeding on a larger food item. And the crawdads in Lake Hodges they're not huge, but that carp is dialed into that. And a carp at Hodges is going to be bigger bodied because they're feeding on a larger, a more higher protein food item. Whereas you go to Henshaw and they're feeding primarily on bugs, hoppers, maybe some smaller crayfish. So each reservoir the carp is going to act differently in each reservoir that you're going to target them.
Fantastic. So saltwater near shore, one of the places that when I was reading your article just sounded fascinating was Mission Bay. And just all the, just what that looked like and the tidal influences. Do you consider that to be saltwater near shore? Is that what you would consider that?
I think any bay near shore, it's all kind of the same. Although the bay, the near shore could be the kelp beds as well. But let's just talk about the bay and why Mission Bay is so great. So Mission Bay is a relatively small bay compared to San Diego Bay. It's a man-made bay, and it's got really great wading access for people. Pretty much anywhere in Mission Bay you can wade. And in fact, the photo behind us is a guy wading under the Ingram Street Bridge. Excuse me. And most of Mission Bay is set up like this. And so the fly angler can go out and find those great flats and really fish them. Whereas if you're going on San Diego Bay, you have big, deep rock jetties and all that kind of stuff. And they're a little bit more difficult to fish, in my opinion. The other great thing about Mission Bay is they have a couple of different fish that I like to fish that get into those shallow flats. And one of them is called the Corvina, not the Corvina, but the Corvina. And so if you're from the East Coast, it looks like a weak fish or a speckled trout. They have two of these canine teeth that come down. They have kind of an orange mouth. But those fish, right now, they are happening. And it's typically a early spring into early summer fish. And for whatever reason, they kind of get into the eastern part of the bay. They're probably spawning. And they get into fairly large schools, and you can catch them on the fly. The thing is, they're a low light feeder, so it's an early morning gig. So timing the tide, a flood tide that's coming up, they'll come in on that tide, and you can have some really, really great fishing. Once that sun kind of gets high in the sky, they sink out like a speckled trout. They'll go sit in a hole, right? And they'll wait for that low light period to come back. So maybe that's in the evening. But I pretty much only fish them early in the morning. But they're really, really a cool fish. And I love catching this because they fight really well. And you can get them on surface poppers too.
Oh yeah, total predators.
What's that?
They're total predators, man. They just love chowing.
Oh, they're great. And you can get some pretty big ones too. I mean, you can get some fairly large ones this time of year. Where they go in the summer, I don't know. They may migrate out into the open ocean. But they're my favorite in the bay. But you can target bay bass, spotfin croaker. That's kind of like the permit of the bay. Not a lot of sight fishing opportunities to any of those fish. But you're casting, or you're kind of structure fishing, finding the long points as that tide's coming up. You're kind of casting into the areas, working the margins of the weed lines. And Mission Bay is very shallow. So you can fish it with an intermediate line. Some guys fish it with floating lines. I like intermediate lines. You can control the depth of that fly. But it is kind of a dance, though, figuring out the right fly for keeping it right above the weed lines. And the weed lines in there can get pretty thick. So finding the appropriate spots where you have sand and then meeting weeds, those are always the best spots. Also, I mean, there's really great halibut fishing this time of year too, and those are very close to the shore as well. Once again, I think that's an early morning, late evening fish. So those early morning, late evening flood tides, they come in, and they're primarily feeding on smelt. So if you find an area with smelt, have the appropriate pattern for that with an intermediate line, and I think you'll have some success. So this is my dad. I got to show you this picture. This is my father back in 1968, and we used to fish on this little old aluminum boat. So he's the one who inspired me to start fly fishing, but he was an early saltwater fly rodder. In fact, he was a member of they were called the Saltwater Fly Rodders of America, and I think I still have his card. I want to say he was the 50th member or something like that. But it was a famous club, and I think no, that's a Fenwick patch, but anyway. But he's the guy that got me into it. I still have that rod and reel, by the way. And by the way, I still use it. It's really cool to take that out there in honor of my dad to catch bonita. The thing is, the bonita we get now are a lot bigger than that. We've recently big slugs. So, but yeah, I just had to show you that.
Like anything, you take it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
Dad got you started. You take it to the next level.
Oh yeah, it's great.
How did he get into fly fishing?
He got into fly fishing later on in life. In fact, he got into fishing later in life. I think he was probably, I want to say he was probably in his 30s. And I think he just wanted to start fishing. He fished a little bit as a kid, and then he didn't do it. And then I think he may have, I mean, obviously he had a friend that got him into it, but then he got the bug. He got the bug. And I remember, he was a school teacher, and he taught at one of the Catholic all-boys schools down here in San Diego. He was also the disciplinary vice principal. But I remember he would get up early in the morning, and he would get ready for school. Always wore a sport coat and a tie. Always looked really good. Always had his shoes totally polished. And he'd walk out of the house with his fly rod. and he would go to the San Diego River before school, and he would throw poppers for largemouth bass.
Huh.
And then he would come home, and back then, he kept some fish, right? And he would come home with a bass or a crappie. Yeah, I mean, he was into it. And
That's
I wish I
awesome.
would have added these photos. I've got great photos of him in his tie, and he at school they used to take a picture of him because he'd walk into school with a bass, and they'd always take a picture of him. And then he started a great fishing club called the St. Augustine's Angling Society, and he probably had 50 kids in that group, and he would take them fishing on half-day boats. He would take them to campouts at Lake Henshaw. And I remember as a very small kid hanging out with those guys. But even today, those members, those kids that were in that program that are still around, still reach out to me and say how my dad changed their lives by getting them into fishing. And a lot of these guys have gone on to be very, very successful in many, many different silos in life. But the experience of fishing and bonding with my dad and their fellow classmates through fishing really changed their life. So fishing, even though my dad came to it later in life, he really inspired generations of fishermen. Not only men, boys and men, but also even women as well. So yeah, he was
That's
a
incredible.
really cool dude.
Love it. And you've kind of followed in his footsteps in a lot of ways, not just with the fishing, but you're also your program lead for Cast Hope down in San Diego.
I am, yeah. So I'm the regional director, and so yeah,
Yeah.
and so yes, his inspiration of helping out young people getting into fishing. I mean, I didn't even realize that until I started Cast Hope, and I would think think of myself while I was working with our kids, going, so this seed was planted back in 1970 when I was a little kid hanging out with all these high school guys on a half-day boat, and seeing how my dad interacted with them and how he got them out into nature and how he changed their lives just by opening that door. And so, yeah, so he planted the seed that long ago, and so it's really cool to see that come full circle.
Oh, no, that's incredible. And I think one of the things that I love about this idea of local fishing and through California Fly Fisher, that, what we're promoting is, um, the idea of local fishing because it's so accessible to kids, especially, right?
It is.
And here in San Francisco, figuring out the, striper fishing, seeing how many kids that have gotten into fishing because they realize that they can ride their bike to go fishing is incredible.
It isn't,
It's so neat.
where we live, same thing. And, it's only been in recent years that I've seen that. Working for the city lakes for many, many years, I saw a great decline in the participation of kids and parents, fathers, mothers getting kids fishing. And I would say it would be in the early 90s when it really declined. And I always thought about that. Well, and the reason why it declined is because there was more of an emphasis on travel baseball and soccer and all this other things. Fishing was replaced by that. But what I'm seeing now, I'm seeing this new group of young people that are inspired to go outdoors, and just so happen they love to fish. And it is really neat to see, like you said, seeing those kids, like the pack of kids with e-bikes with their milk crate on the back and their 2 rods, and they're just like, yeah, we're going down the lagoon and we're going to do this, or we're going to go to the La Costa golf course. We're going to sneak in, and not that I'm saying it's okay, but to see that energy the way I just was stoked on fishing. I was in Walmart the other day looking for something, and I always walk through the tackle section, right? And I'm standing there, and I look, and there's 10 kids standing there. And they're all like picking up the lures. I'm like, yeah, this is the best one working at La Costa. Or the guy's like, no, that one sucks. This one's the one that's, and they were like going back and forth on what was the best lure to use. And I'm like, all right, I love it. This is really
That's
great.
awesome.
It was so
I mean, let's
cool.
be honest. The kids fishing the golf course is the highest and best use of the golf course. So,
Dude, I'm telling you, and there's something defiant about it that I really like.
yeah, it's
The
good.
kids, they're jumping the guardrail a little bit. And
Got it.
I always tell my son, and he's one of them. I say, you're be respectful, right?
Yeah.
Some of the security guards think it's cool, some don't. But the ones that don't, don't support that, be respectful and say thank you and just leave. And he does. And I think most of the kids do that. But I mean, when I managed Lake Murray, I would have kids in there all the time sneaking in. And it was like, I got it. I totally, I understood it.
Yeah.
And I was never like the Johnny Hardboots guy chasing them out of there. I'm like, well, guys,
Yeah.
you know what you're doing. Yes, sir, Mr. Bowman. Okay. And I would just walk away. So
Love
anyway,
it.
but there's
That's a
something cool.
massive bass. What's going on there?
What's that?
That's a massive bass. What's happening there?
Oh, that's Michelle. This is my wife.
Yeah.
She's a great angler. And every time I take her out, she catches a big fish. And this is a big giant calico she got. I think it was in July. How's that? That thing was like 6-7 pounds.
That thing's insane.
So Michelle, she's awesome. She had never fished before we even got together. And on our third date, I took her fishing. Took her out on the boat. She had never picked up a fishing rod. And we're motoring out. And I stop the boat. And I start putting out a chum slick for sharks. She's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm setting up a chum slick for sharks. She's like, what? You shark fish? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I'm a surfer, right? I go, yeah, so am I. She's like, I'm totally afraid. I'm afraid of sharks. I'm like, oh. She sat up on the bow of the boat for like 30 minutes and didn't say anything. I'm like, well, this is the third and probably last date we'll ever have. When the first shark showed up, it was about an 80-pound Mako. She looked at it and went, wow, that is a beautiful, beautiful creature. She's a marine biologist, by the way, so she has a great appreciation for creatures like that. And I go, you want to catch it? She's like, you're going to release it? I go, of course, I don't keep anything. She's like, okay. And so I put the fly rod in her hand, and she made a cast, and she hooked it. And she fought it, and we got it to the boat. We released it. And she looked at me, and she said, that was the most incredible thing I've ever done. So the second most incredible thing she ever done was marry me. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so anyway, but that inspired her to start fishing. And ever since that moment, she's an unbelievable fisherman. So there was a big a surfboard fishing craze down here back in the mid 2000s. And she kind of started that. And she had a surfboard, big longboard, and she'd go out and she would fish in the kelp. And she would fish conventional as well as fly. And sort of one of her legendary moments was she caught a 60-pound white sea bass on her surfboard. There's a picture of it. I wish I had it.
Oh.
She hooked it. She went out that morning. She went out the previous morning because she had heard that the white sea bass were off La Jolla. So she paddled out before first light and got out there, caught her own bait. So she caught some mackerel, and she hooked a massive fish and basically broke her off. And so she's like, I got to be back there. So the next morning she went back out, did the same thing, and landed this 60-pounder. And the white sea bass at that time were in there, in that certain general area. This thing was massive. So as she's fighting it, there are guys on a half-day boat watching it, cheering her on. And so she basically gaffs this thing herself, gets it on the surfboard, brings it in, and her friend Calvin took a picture of it, and she's holding it like this, and it's stretching all the way down her back. It's a legendary photo. It's
That's incredible.
Oh yeah, she's got way more street credit than I do in the fishing community down here. I mean, I'm a nothing compared to her. I mean, really, but it's really cool. But so she and I we've traveled all over the world. We've been, and she's just a great angler. The thing is, I don't get a lot of bow time though when she's fishing. But yeah,
that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. But no, she's awesome. But yeah, that was a big calico. And there were guys on the half-day boats that saw it, and they weren't catching anything. She catches this, they're like, oh, man. So anyway, yeah, I love that photo. Okay, there's a bit. So this is bonita. So these are going off right now in San Diego.
Damn.
So this would be considered near shore, right? This is a near shore fish. So that is a kind of an average size bonita we're getting right now. That's probably a 6-pounder. Earlier last month, we were getting them over 10 pounds. So this is definitely a fish you can catch on a fly rod, but you definitely need a boat to do this, or a kayak. You can catch smaller ones off the jetties. So if you're fishing Mission Jetty or Ocean Beach Jetty, you can do that. Another great option is to go when the bonita come in the bay, and they'll come in the bay usually in October. You can rent a skiff, at one of the landings. I work at a Dana landing. They have these great little skiffs that you can rent. You can go over to the jetty or the bait barge and catch bonita. Now they're not going to be this big, but they're going to be kind of the size of the one my dad had right here, like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're great on like a 6-weight, and they smoke it, and they hit poppers. So it's really cool. They feed on the surface. So
That's awesome.
I'll tell you, they call those kind of false albacore on the East Coast. It's not a true false albacore, but they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
But that is a great fish on a fly rod that we do have here off San Diego.
And you're using wire leaders for those?
I don't use wire leaders.
Just
no.
like 60-pound or something?
Not even that. So I'll usually a 25-pound fluoro sometimes. Yeah. You don't need to. Their teeth are spaced out enough to where they don't really saw through the line. Now a barracuda, on the other hand, they will saw through the line because their teeth are tighter together and they're more sharp on the like when a barracuda grabs, they'll grab the back of the fly, and a lot of times you get ahead of it. They basically they'll saw the line off.
Clip your line right there.
But barracuda can get really weird with steel leaders too. So sometimes that's when you'd up the pound test. But when you set the hook, you never want to lift your rod tip. You want to keep it pointed right at the fish. You fight them like that, so they don't have a chance to kind of wiggle up the line and basically grab hit that mono. But you do lose a lot of them. So a lot of times I'll go ahead and increase the fluorocarbon poundage or test. But also you can use very, very short, very, very thin single strand wire too. Like 30-pound test, and that'll work. But a very short piece, because a barracuda, even if it's that long, sometimes they get really weird. They won't hit it. So this is a halibut. This is another great bay species that you can get this time of year. You can get them year round, but this is when they're up in shallower water. So these guys spawn in March, April, and May. And so Mission Bay is a great place to catch them from the shore. Also, if you want to have some good success with the halibut, you can go to any of the estuaries in San Diego and fish where the water is dumping out into the open ocean. And what happens, these halibut come up out of the surf and they spawn back in these estuaries, so you can get them before they get back in there. And a really good one is the Del Mar estuary, right below the railroad tracks. Right off Jimmy Durante Road. It's a very, very good place on a flood tide. It's excellent.
For us, water treatment plants are a good one too.
Oh God, those are awesome. Oh
yeah,
wow.
dump in all that warm water.
Oh, they love it. Yeah, I mean, we used to have one, the SCG&E plant in the back of San Diego Bay, and we used to catch little baby Jack Crevalle back there.
Oh no way.
So the long range boats would go down south and they would catch jacks and they'd put them in their bait well and they would dump them in the bay, San Diego Bay, when they'd come back. And then they basically gravitated towards that warmer water. And yeah, we used to get Jack Crevalle. We used to get, you still get quite a few bonefish back there too in San Diego Bay. You also get it in Mission Bay. But I remember, and this was back in the probably the late 80s, early 90s. But it was pretty cool. The guy who took me back there is an old commercial fisherman, and we'd go back there with we catch them on conventional gear with Zara spooks, but it was neat. But they don't exist anymore. They're just not there because the warm water's not. But this halibut, that's a good size halibut. But these, you can get these, in the bay. Any of the estuary systems that dump in along our beaches will hold these fish. Got to time the tides right. Once again, moon phase is very critical on these fish. So once again, that full moon up to that 5 days prior to a full moon up to the full moon is a very good time to target these. Also, if you want to time any grunion runs, during the summer, that's a good time to target these. I know, and I've done this a few times. You can basically two-hand cast to these by swinging flies in these estuaries because they're big enough. And swinging a fly for halibut is very good. And a basic white, like a deceiver, anything white, red and white, that's tied with marabou, anything that has a lot of movement to it. Honestly, any of those like zonkers, any of that stuff will work. So it's really cool. and two-handed fishing in some of these estuaries is kind of cool. But swinging
Nice.
the fly is really critical because these things lay up and they won't chase after something, but if something comes over their head, they'll come up and grab it and try to pull it back down to the bottom. So, but it's kind of like steelhead fishing, actually. It really is. So if you're into that, if you're into two-handed casting, the Del Mar slough or lagoon is very good. The mouth of it, it's very, very good. That's a big secret. Don't tell anybody.
I love it. Well, let's talk about something with a few more teeth.
Oh yeah, these guys right here. Okay, so
What?
this is the Mount Everest of fly fishing. That's like a 500-pound Mako that was caught sight fished too with a fly. So this is what I do in the summer here. And my season starts usually in May and goes all the way through November. Nick Curcione is the guy who got me into this. I think you said Nick's on the.
Yeah, he's on. Yeah.
He's the guy who inspired me to go after these guys. I mean, he wrote so many great articles, wrote a great book, and he wrote a chapter on Makos, and that inspired me to go out and start targeting these things in a very small boat when I first started. And it has really changed my life. So I have everything in fly fishing. These guys, I credit that to Nick. And then, I've had a lot of great commercial fishermen that have really helped me along the way to really figure out this game. So it is dynamic. It's unbelievable. It rivals anything, if anybody's fished marlin, sailfish, this definitely is definitely in that league, if not greater, because they are big and they jump like nothing else. And you can really sight fish to them. And over the years, I've really kind of refined the way I fish them. I still chum them in, but I use certain flies now that kind of float on the surface that I think they imitate birds, smaller birds, and Makos chase birds around. So when they see that fly, they come up and grab it off the surface. And it's really neat to engage with a fish like that with a fly that's skirting on the surface, and they come up and grab it. It's almost like a big giant brown trout rising on a foam hopper. It's just like, and it is really cool. Some of these fish are well over 500 pounds. So that's kind of a schoolie size Mako right there. That's like probably 100 pounds. Great fish.
I was reading your article and the interview you did in, I don't know, maybe it was the last issue where Al Q was interviewing you. And you were talking about like assessing the Mako. And I think I know the answer to this. Before you cast your fly to it, you kind of check them out a little bit. Has any shark shown up that were too large and you're like, I'm not going for that one?
Well, yeah. So I'll tell you about a certain fish that came in last year. I'll have a client cast at any Mako, and any Mako will hit a fly if it's in the right headspace. Whether they hit the fly without any provoking, or I provoke it with a hookless teaser, a bait and switch. You can get them to do that. The thing is, the really big ones, sometimes they come in and they're on a mission to attack the boat. They really don't want anything to do with the fly. Those are the only ones. And so I had one last year that would not leave the boat alone, and it basically chewed my swim staff to bits.
I saw the photos from that. Yeah.
Oh, I may even have that photo here. Well, when we get to it, I'll mention it. But I had to move away from that fish, and it followed me. I moved away from it. I was going about 10 knots, and it got right on me. And it followed me until I said, okay, we got to get out of here, because it wouldn't leave me alone. So we moved 5 miles away from this fish, down the beach. Set the chum slick up. We're waiting. 2 hours later, guess who shows up? That same shark. Now he wanted to play, and we hooked him. And we hooked him, we jumped him, broke him off. The guy basically said, I can't do that. He was on it for like 45 minutes. He's like, this is too much. Plus the thing ran. I mean, I was chasing it down, and I just couldn't stop it. And so we buckled the drag down and popped it off. But yeah, I mean, there's some fish that are just so aggressive. They don't want anything to do other than to attack the boat. So that's the dynamic with this fish. We're actually being hunted down. It's not like going tarpon fishing where you go for a tarpon and there he is and they spook. Makos don't spook. They just get really aggressive.
with all that in mind, there's also quite a famous story of you jumping into a kayak to
Oh
chase
yeah,
one of these fish down.
yeah,
So knowing everything you know,
yeah.
I want you to tell that story, and then secondly, do you think it's a stupid idea or was it brave? Where were you at on that
Oh,
in retrospect?
it was totally stupid. It was so we were doing an article for Field and Stream years ago, and one of the guys on the trip, his name was Jeremy. He was an extreme kayaker from Colorado. Well, all the guys on the trip thought it would be really funny if Jeremy hopped in a kayak and hooked a big Mako and let it tow him around, right? So that opportunity presented itself. And we look at Jeremy, he's like, "Oh, I'm not doing that, dude." He's like, he didn't want to do it. I'm like, and so we had a photographer there, a guy named Bill Decker. He's a local San Diego guy, really funny guy. And he's like, "Well, who's going to do it? We got to get this. We got to get the shot for the magazine." I'm like, "Oh man." And so he goes, "Well, okay." He said, "Let's paper, rock, scissors for it." And we all looked at each other, we're like, "Oh, okay." And so we paper, rock, scissors, and I lost. So I hop in this kayak and and by the way, I didn't have a paddle. I just kind of drifted out into the chum slick. So the shark that came in was only about 150 pounds. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool. This will be a piece of cake, right?" So I get out into the slick and I'm looking back at the boat. I'm probably, I don't know, 100 feet out. And Kurt Dieter was on the boat with me. Bill Decker, a guy named Jeremy, and another guy. And so they're looking, and I'm like, "Where's the fish?" They're like, "We don't see it. It disappeared." I'm like, "Oh." And then all of a sudden they go, "Oh my God, look at this one." And right when they said that, this giant fin popped up right in front of the boat. And I'm like, "How big is that thing?" They're like, "Dude, that thing's like 300-400 pounds." I'm like, "What?" And so I don't have a paddle. I can't. I'm drifting kind of away from the boat. So
Roughly
Decker goes, "Just make the
seal
cast."
sized.
Yeah. This shark was as big as the kayak. I was in an 8-foot kayak. It was bigger. So Decker goes, "Just make the cast. I want to get the photo." So I make the cast. I have a big popper on, and this thing came over and grabbed the popper off the surface. And I set the hook and I hook it. I'm like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" So the thing so it feels the hook and it starts running and it spins the kayak around. Now it's towing me out west, totally in the opposite direction of the boat. I'm going. It's like a Nantucket sleigh ride. And I hear Decker go, hold on, we're going to chase after you." So they get up next to me, right? And this thing's towing me, and I can't put any pressure on it because I'm in a kayak, right? It's just like, and I've got straight 60-pound with a steel leader, so I can't break it off. I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" So they're motoring up close to me, and we got the fly line, and then all of a sudden the line goes slack. I'm like, "Oh, good." The thing broke off, and I'm reeling. All of a sudden, I see the fins coming right back at the kayak. Here it comes. And so it's closing in on the kayak now. It's coming right at me. I'm like, "What the hell?" And so it sees the kayak and it kind of spooks and it dives straight down. And there's a photo of me full bendo on this. I mean, full on bendo. And I'm like totally buckled. And you can see the guys in the background like going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And so Decker goes, "Just throw the rod in the water. We're going to come over and get you." Because I think the thought was it was going to sound and come up and jump. And that's what I was thinking. And it was going to jump in the boat. Because what happens when they sound, they come up. They don't stay down. And when they rocket out of the water, it could have been right over the kayak. And that thing would have landed on me, right? So it's going, and I'm like, "Oh shoot, it's gonna jump," because the reel's going like that. And then all of a sudden, it broke off. And that was it. So anyway, they motor up next to me and they're like, "God, that was crazy, man." And so and I got a good look at it. It was big. It was a big shark. So yeah, back to your question. Yeah, it was stupid. I'll never do that again. But yeah, so now I just stay in the boat. But I'm seeing way bigger sharks than that now. That's like an average day now during the season, during prime time. I mean, we're just seeing bigger and bigger sharks. And the reason why is because we've had a lot of bluefin tuna here over the last 10, 15 years. So it's a larger food item for them. They migrate up and they just hang out. The food items there, the big females come in here, they breed, and then they go offshore. I think they go up off Catalina. But
So
also,
wait, these things can chase down bluefin tuna?
oh, easy. Oh, totally. Oh, absolutely. They chase down swordfish. So they say the Mako is the third fastest fish in the ocean. but it is honestly the fastest fish. I think if you talk about burst speed, and I think they think they can go 40 to 50 miles an hour in the water. And I've
Wow.
seen them blow through a chum slick. I mean, it's incredible. It's like a flash, and that shark is over 500 pounds. They're
Wow.
insane. They're an absolute killing machine. And if you look at this photo, I mean, they're totally hydrodynamic. I mean, pointed nose,
Yeah.
big eye. I mean, there's not one wasted thing on that fish, and that's why they're so fast. And they're an absolute killer too. And I've seen them attack seals and sea lions and porpoise and all kinds of stuff. So it is really good to stay in the boat with one of these things. But on the other hand, they're a wonderful game fish that will, challenge you, challenge your fish fighting abilities. There's nothing that the aerial display of a Mako shark is so incredible. They have incredible hang time. They're just an unbelievable fish. There's a great shot of a big one we got a couple of years ago.
Wow.
You can see the fly in its mouth. So we use tube flies. So
Yeah.
that's sliding up the leader. And that fly is about 10 inches long. So how big do you think that fish is? That's a big Mako.
That's wild. It's got a lot of meat by its tail back there.
Yeah, it's called a caudal peduncle. So it's like a keel, and that's what generates all their speed. So the other fish that has that is a swordfish.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a very similar caudal fin. And so basically, Mako sharks, their primary food item in August are swordfish. So they eat swordfish. They go in and they eat them. And you'll see it. You'll see a swordfish on the surface sunning itself, and you'll see a Mako shark a lot of times behind it. And they come in and they try to bite the tail off the swordfish. But they're equally awesome. I mean, they're equally they're vicious. I mean, a swordfish is a very aggressive fish. They'll attack the boat too, and they're built the same. So it's this really great. It's like a big MMA fight when they're going at each other.
Good matchup.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's
awesome.
it's equal. It's pretty badass. A lot of times, or many times over the years, I've seen Mako sharks with big scars across their body, and that's a swordfish slashing the Mako as they come in and try to bite the tail. It's pretty cool. So, the season, right now we're seeing them right now. And this year we've had them here all year, not the big ones. So the big ones show up. And when I talk about a big Mako, it's probably, anything 200 pounds or bigger is what I consider big. But the big flow of those larger, 300 to 700 pound fish is going to be May, June, July, and August. But we get them all the way through November, and they haven't left this year. They're still here, but not the big ones. So right now we're getting them up to like 80 pounds, which is a perfect fly rod fish. That is a great fish. A lot of people, if they haven't caught a large fish, an 80-pound Mako is probably a good place to start. You probably don't want to start with 500 pounds because that's a workout. And so I call it, climbing up the ladder. You can start with a smaller one, and then you can kind of progress up. And a lot of times that happens during our season. The first shark that shows up might be 40 pounds, and then the end of the day, you end up with a 400 or 500 pounder. So the anglers have the ability to kind of work his or her way up the ladder. So, but all these points here, more big Makos over the last 10 years because of bluefin tuna, May, June. That's when the bluefin migration really starts, and they kind of hang around. So bluefin tuna equals bigger Mako sharks. Tackle
800 yards of backing.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I've been spooled before, and so the last time I got spooled, I said, this can't happen again, and this was several years ago. Because I always thought, I can chase these things down, I can get them to leader and all this stuff. But as the fish got bigger, it was a higher likelihood I was going to get spooled. And so the one that spooled me took 700 to 800 yards of back, took everything. I couldn't stop it. And I had 60 pound, I couldn't break it off. And I went, okay, so now I tie in a fuse box tippet. It's about that long. It's a very short piece of 30 pound. And it's right above the steel leader. And I attached that to 80-pound fluorocarbon. So my overall leader length is about 12 feet. So what that does, it gives me the ability, if I have one of those just ornery Makos that just doesn't want to stop and I'm chasing it down, I can just buckle the drag down and pop that fuse box. And the flies, as you can see, they're tube flies. So I tie them on bigger tubes. So what will happen is the fly will float up to the surface because they have foam on them. So I'll get the fly back, and then I use a barbless hook. The Makos will shake that out of their mouth, or it'll basically dissolve after a matter of days. And my steel leaders are very short. They're like 2.5 feet long. So nothing's left in the Mako's mouth. I get the fly back in most cases, and it works out really, really great. That's just a really big reel. That's just a big, giant Mako 9700. So these hold 800 yards of backing. So
it's like $200 in gel spun.
Oh, I know. You know what I do is I'll put the gel spun and then I top shot that with like 30 pound.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to break 30 pound. Plus,
yeah.
Especially if I have my fuse box, and the fuse box, the knot is going to give up before the 30 pound. But that's my new system. So
I love that expression, fuse box. That's
it cuts
a little
the
breaker. Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, it's saved me so many times over the last several years. Because you get some guy who's really, really motivated, right? They hook like an 800 pounder. They're like, oh, I can get him. I'm like, okay. So 2 hours into it, he's like, break this thing off, dude. I can't get it. So, but I think the biggest one I got to the boat last year was probably 600.
That's incredible.
And the fish ran, it jumped, did everything we wanted it to do, and then it basically got on the surface and started just swimming. So I basically closed the gap with the boat. It took me an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, but we got up on it, and it burned enough energy through the jumps where it was just kind of kicking along the surface. And I got within 12 feet of it and grabbed the leader. And those fish, I popped that leader. I don't do a release with a release stick. I just pop the fuse box, and the fly floats up to the surface, and I've got it.
Yeah.
So it's great. And, the angler can see the fish right there and how big they are, So that's the cool thing about that system. So these are some of the flies I tie. So, these are kind of, they have a little bit of foam tied into them. They float right below the surface. And the reason I do that is because I want that shark to come up and grab the fly. I want him to come up and grab like this. I don't want him sinking out and grabbing it in deep water, because a lot of times you don't get a positive hook set. You're not seeing where you're hooking them, and you really want to get them right in the corner of the mouth. You also want them to grab it and turn away from the boat and then set the hook. And that's something that I do with all the clients. I go through that whole scenario. You don't want to hook them coming to the boat because they can jump in the boat. You don't want that to happen. But these are sort of these are the flies that I use that are just right below the surface. And I think I've got a picture. Okay, this is the other fly. This is a very sophisticated fly here, folks. Yeah, this is my custom bird fly. Not very pretty, but it works. So what this does, it floats on the surface like this, and when you strip it, it goes like that. And so we get a shark in the slick. I'll have you throw this first. You throw it, you strip it, and many times the sharks just come over and grab it because they don't like birds in the slick. It's like competition for them. So over the years, I've seen them how they push the birds out of the slick, or they try to grab them. And so this is really a great fly. So ever since I've been using this, it's a total game changer. I don't have to pick up the teaser rod because this is basically doing it for me. And it's cool because you can strip it and it just goes boom, 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 and it kind of chugs along the surface. And the take is really slow. It's like this, like a real slow grab, like a trout rising on a dry fly. And a 500-pound Mako doing that, it's like, oh god, here we go. It's really cool. So that's kind of like my go-to fly. And I always encourage people, tie your own fly, tie some of these up before if you go fishing with me, because they don't have to look great. If you're a great fly tyer, you can maybe jazz them up a little bit, but that's it.
That's awesome.
So my friend Zeno in LA was the first one to make this fly over 25 years ago, and so I've been using it. I call it the Zeno Toad. So
well, I had to take a moment to check my calendar during those dates because I got to get down there and do that with you. And I messaged Nick that we got to go do it this year. So
oh yeah.
so tell us, like, how does somebody book you for a trip to go Mako fishing?
So you can go. I've got a slide. You want me to show the slide? I think I've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go back to the jump shots in a minute. Oh, and we'll go back to that. But here, this is how you get a hold of me right here. So there you go. ConwayBowman.com is my website. There's my phone number. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I have a Twitter account, but I don't use it. So
they've also changed the name of Twitter since you had a Twitter
Oh,
account,
that's right.
so,
That's right.
it's
See, I
X
am
now,
old school.
You are an
Wow.
old. You just became an old head now.
I'm
That's
totally
it.
old. So anyway, so that's the information. Now I want to go back to something. These are the people that keep me on the water too. They're great. They really support me. So let's do this. I want to just go through this. Okay, so we're talking about jumping, right? So I have two boats. This is the Triton. It's a fairly small boat. It's like an oversized flats boat, but it's cool when you have a big shark come into it. I'm primarily chumming for these fish. Best way to get fish close to the boat within casting range. And when they're at the boat, they're at the boat. You've got a high likelihood you're going to hook them. You can kind of see the fly right there. That's a really big, that's 1,000-pounder coming in.
Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
How old do you think that fish is?
I don't use the milk crate anymore because right after that photo, it tore the milk crate off the boat. And I never saw it again. So, but that is not, what's that?
How old do you think that fish is?
Hard to say. I don't know. 20 years old, 50 years old. I don't know. It's a big, big Mako though. But this is what it's all about, watching these wonderful jumps. That was the first Mako we got last season, May 15th.
Insane fish.
Yeah. And look, you're fairly close to shore. You're inside of land most of the time when we're fishing these things. Hey, that's the other great thing is that we're not making a big long run. We're fishing spots that are fairly close to the coast. So it's kind of nice, hooking a big fish, maximizing our fishing time. And, a day of fishing, you're actually getting, 6, 7 hours of solid fishing in. So it's really cool. It's really great. So let's see, that's the next shot.
That's wild, man.
That's so cool. How's that? So this is an Al Q photo, which is wonderful. We went out and did these photos a number of years ago. That's an Al Q.
Now, when you go out and you fish for Makos, do you jump them a couple times and fuse box them? Where are you at with the progression of your fishing with Makos?
Yeah, I fuse box them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I like seeing people catch Makos. I've caught so many. But it's interesting. I've got it to where I know a fish, I can feed it pretty quickly. But I like getting people to the point where they can learn how to feed them, right? Because you can feed these without teasing them. You just have to get the fly in the right spot. So me sort of getting them to that point, and whether the angler wants to try to get it to the boat or not, I don't know. But for me, fuse boxing is the best way to go because it's a clean release. You're not on them forever. Like this fish right here in this photo, that's a 400-pound Mako.
Totally.
And, I'm chasing that. I'm solo in the boat there chasing it down. But I don't want to be tied up with that thing for 3 hours, The beauty and what makes these fish so majestic is the jump. Once you see that engage with that hook set and you watch that jump, in my opinion, that's all you need, right?
Yeah, and just break them off.
Break them off. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
It performed for you. And I always say this, I'm not a fishing guy. I am, but I'm more in the entertainment business. I'm a director of a show, right? And that's the show right there. Getting that fish to do that. That's what I want people to see because they'll have a greater appreciation for these fish. Catch and release only. That's all I do. I've never killed one. That's my son's first day out last year, releasing a 200-pound Mako. He loved it. He's gonna be my deckhand this year.
Nice.
I got bit by a Mako a couple years ago. So if you're gonna go out and do this, make sure that you are careful. I had a big glove on and it bit through the glove. So
you're part of the chum line now.
Pretty much. And that's pretty much that kind of wraps up the Mako thing. I think all the stuff we covered was, so that's San Diego fishing there. It's the urban, it's the saltwater, bay near shore, and then ultimately it's the kind of the culmination of the Mako shark thing. So
that's incredible, man. Well, I know I will be down south in September. So I'm gonna need your dates in September.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I've got
Yeah,
plenty.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right. I'll message you about that.
Yep.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A component there. Well, Conway, like I said, I've always been so impressed with you and just what you've done with the fishery in San Diego and the Mako shark fishing, and just how gracious and kind and awesome you are. And so really appreciate you taking the time to share with us and the people attending. It's really, really awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for all the people that tuned in. I mean, that's really great to know that people are interested in the fishery down here and what we have to offer. And yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And just want to remind people that Conway's article covering urban fishing in San Diego is on the website. You can catch it there. It doesn't get into the Mako shark, but the other areas that he talked about. And yeah, thank you so much, Conway, for giving us your evening tonight, and really appreciate it. And for everyone tuning in, this will also be recorded and on the website. So if you had to go eat dinner and come back, it's recorded. You can catch it on YouTube, as well as it will live on our website in the same place that you registered for this. So yeah, so book your date with Conway, get out there.
Come on, let's go.
I'm not a shark person. I don't think I'll be joining you and George.
Well, hey, we'll go carp fishing.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Awesome. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Conway. Bye, Tracy.
Bye.